Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the One Step Better podcast. I am Mike Schaefer, and with me this week, we have Greg Henderson. You guys have heard Greg before. Greg is, he kind of oversees our outsourced HR department area, whatever you want to call it. Greg's responsibilities are really helping our clients get one step better in the arena of HR. Does a lot of work talking with clients about things they're doing right, things they're doing wrong, ways they can improve, both from a compliance standpoint, but also strategic. Has a lot of experience in that realm. And Greg's background, if you don't remember, is in the Army. A lot of experience in the Army. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about today is leadership and how we as leaders continue to improve and ways in which we can do that. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. But to get us started today, Greg, we always like to start with a fun question to prime the pump, if you will. So internally, last week, we started to have a little bit of a debate around who is the leader of the Avengers. It turned into a Slack poll. I saw you posted on LinkedIn, and quite a lot of views, quite a lot of debate that came from this. And so my question to you is, out of all of the characters of the Avengers, who is the leader of the group?
So I'll have to take credit for that whole debate. I walked into the sales team and I said, hey, who makes the best leader, Captain America or Iron Man? And wow, the discussion went way, way more than I wanted it to, because I was trying to find some research to try to find a new
You were
article.
looking for like a one
I was looking for like Captain America and move on, right?
Yeah.
It became a whole discussion. We had a very comic book view from other people. I mean, it was very, very involved. And so Maggie put out and said, hey, let's try this on Slack.
We're going to figure it out.
And so she put in like Nick Fury, she put in different things, and just the answers that we got back were wrong, for one. But just the idea that, wow, we view leadership in different ways, and I think it's because of what we need at the time. And I'll get to that in a second. So my answer to the poll doesn't change. Captain America is the best leader the Avengers had.
Is he the actual leader of the group?
That's open for debate.
I'm asking your opinion. You should be an expert in your opinion.
In my opinion, yes, the answer to both questions is Captain America.
Okay, I would agree with that. However, a lot of people said Iron Man. A couple of people said Nick Fury. I think we even had a couple of votes for other, which I don't know how you could even vote for other.
Right. They didn't even add anything.
Ant-Man is clearly not the leader of the Avengers. I don't know, I don't know where you're going with that.
You talk to my 6-year-old Hulk. I mean, that's the leader of the Avengers right there.
Yeah. I think Hulk could probably beat up everybody else.
That's right.
But yeah, my 6-year-old, he is a big fan of Hulk. It gets us in trouble sometimes because he likes to impersonate Hulk at all of the wrong times and destroy our house. But that's part of the fun. I did think that this poll question specifically for us internally, and probably among comic book and Marvel fans, is a debate. And I will give license to that debate. However, there's only one right answer. And that right answer is not up for debate. It is Captain America. He is the clear leader of the group. And if you disagree, that's fine. You could post it, let us know on YouTube if you disagree.
Sure.
You're wrong, but you can disagree. That's perfectly fine.
Again, we'll entertain the debate.
Yeah, we'll tell you you're wrong on YouTube, in our comments, wherever it needs to be. But it does bring up a more real world view of what leadership is, because I think at the heart of why people disagree is partly, other than this is just a silly game of comic book and Marvel movie fun, there's a fundamental difference there between, because the main answers we got were either Captain America or Iron Man, and I think those are probably the top two. Maybe if you want to throw Nick Fury in there, but those are really the top two people that people are gonna gravitate towards. And there are two different leadership styles. There's two very different personalities in those two characters. And ultimately, I think that sheds light on why somebody sees somebody as a leader. And so I want to know, in your experience, I mean, you've been in high pressure situations, in large group leadership, small group leadership, all across the board. Characterize a little bit, because we can use Marvel as an example. the two different approaches of leadership that we really see in Captain America and Iron Man, and because I think those are real life examples of leadership styles.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think the other reason why people have a hard time figuring out which one is what is because Iron Man had such a great evolution in the movies. So we talk about the very first Iron Man compared to what he did in the very last Iron Man. That's a totally different character. So I think that's hard to show what Iron Man was when I'm talking about this. So try to go back to the beginning, right? Iron Man for me in the beginning was more of a transactional leader. The idea that, hey, I have, the standard is going on. I'm going to reward you or punish you if you don't meet the standard. Pretty simple, black and white. Boom, let's go, get it done. For me, Captain America is more the transformational leader. You follow me because of my presence, my attitude, my charisma, my character, period. You follow me for that reason. So it's the idea of the epitome of being Captain America. Well, of course he's a leader. It's in his title, right? He is the captain, right? It makes sense. But I think it's very hard for people to kind of understand what that is because, again, Iron Man had such a great evolution. I think a great leader is servant leaders. And so Iron Man giving up his life for the team at the very end was the epitome of being...
Spoiler alert, right?
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry. We have more things to discuss if you haven't seen Endgame by 2021. But anyway, that's the idea, right? That's the servant leadership that I think we all can get behind and say, yes, that's my leader. Look what he does for the team.
I think that to boil it down a little bit is we all know people who have leader in their title, or by default people look up to them because of their big personality. Maybe they're the loudest in the room, or the most boisterous, or the person who is always pointing, we're going this direction, this direction, this direction. And it's easy to see that person and characterize that person as a leader, even though sometimes they may be leading you off of a cliff, because just the personality, the loud personality of who they are, attracts followers. But you also know people who are, I think of them as quietly humble. I'm here to serve, and I don't need all the attention for it. But people still gravitate towards that because they know they're going to get stuff done, and they know they're going to lead them in the right direction. One is more vocal in their leadership style. The other is more quiet. In your experience, have you had people in your life that are on both sides of that? In which direction have you typically leaned towards in the person, not necessarily that you are, but the person that you want to follow?
That's a great question. And I'm going to cop out a little bit, and it depends with the situation. I'll give you two different kind of scenarios where one was more dominant than the other. If you're downrange, if you're deployed, and it's a very high, tense kind of energy situation going on, the one that produces the calm in the storm is the one that everyone is kind of gravitating to figure out, okay, what's going on? I don't need another hothead if I'm already kind of high energy, high stressed already. I need the guy that's in the room that says, calm down. This is what we're going to do. You do this, you do that, and we're going to make it through. That's that situation that you need that other type of leader in. The other leader, if we're just in a day-to-day garrison environment is what we call it, I need somebody that's going to take charge. I need somebody that's going to stand up and say, no, this is the standard. We're going to uphold the standard. And if you don't make it, then I'm going to leave you behind. Right? If you don't get the small things, which is the standard is a small thing for us. If you don't make the small things, then just get out of the way. I'm gonna move over you, and that's a totally different type of leadership than the guy downrange. Believe it or not, they could be the same person, but they've kind of understood that they have to change and morph into what the situation dictates. Is what just an outstanding leader does. What do you think?
I would agree with you. I think that a really high quality leader learns, like you mentioned, to adapt their style of communication depending upon the situation. If we're in a situation where, chaos is breaking loose, then I typically I'm going to gravitate towards somebody who is bringing calm to that situation. Not that they are underplaying the severity of what is going on, but they're setting a level ground to say, yes, there is a storm. We're going to get through it, and this is how we're going to do it. That's how I gravitate towards those people. I gravitate towards those people. But you do have to be able to have that leader in place that's going to energize the team when everything is quiet and you need to rally the troops and get them pumped up for something. You need a person that can do that. And sometimes that may be a rah-rah guy, but sometimes that may be a lady that's going to just come along and say, hey, this is what we're going towards. Let's get going and pump you up.
Right.
It's not necessarily, how you go about doing that could be different.
Yeah. I don't think I'm trying to figure this out a little bit more. Is there a skill set or an attribute that every great leader has? I don't think that's true. I think they have just a hodgepodge of different things that they kind of tap into as the time in the situation dictates.
Yeah.
Because I believe that leaders are grown, not born.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us into why we're even doing this podcast. So I had we had some emails come through when we were talking about different suggestions for topics, things that we want to talk about. And one of those that came through asked us about leadership, and specifically how we develop leaders internally, but how we as leaders of a company develop ourselves to the point where we have quality leadership skills. And I think that's an important thing to talk about, specifically because you just mentioned you believe leaders are developed or grown, not born. And I would agree with you. I do think there are people that have different personality types naturally that may lend themselves more towards different styles of leadership and personalities that people gravitate towards. However, the majority of quality leaders, if not all of them, are grown up. And like any personality type, left unchecked and not being self-aware about who you are, it's going to be a disaster at some point. And so I thought it would be a good idea to talk about leadership a little bit today, specifically with Greg because of his experience in working in HR in a lot of years, around the idea of how we as leaders continue to develop ourselves so that whenever those situations come up that we have to be completely on, we're ready for it and not caught off guard. So I'm curious to know, you've been in leadership positions for quite some time. How do you always stay on top of your own personal development so that you are prepared for those situations as they pop up?
Yeah, so I have an acronym that I use. I love acronyms. Of course I do, right? It's CPRDF, right? So CPR, don't forget. So it's the idea that you have commitment, you have purpose, relationships, development, and then feedback. And if you're always understanding that, that's the doctrine of leadership on Greg Henderson's spin. It's the idea that leadership is a mindset first and foremost. That's why I believe there's no skill set, no attribute that it's directly, tied to or attributed to this great leader, because it's a mindset, it's a decision, it's an action verb that you have to make in the very beginning, and then all that other stuff comes into play. Purpose is the idea that why are we here? There's got to be more than just, hey, you come to work so I can give you a reward. No, it's got to be something deeper than that, right? And so that's why I want to get into that purpose. As a leader, try to figure out, hey, what is the carrot that my employees or my team really motivates them? What is that? And it's not to dangle in front of them so they can run faster. Like, hey, you never get it. No, that's not the point of that. The point of the conversation is, what is the thing that motivates them so much that I can know because I know them as a leader? And so again, that goes back to relationships. Do you have a relationship with your team? Development, feedback, it's tied together. I have to develop myself as a leader. I have to understand, hey, there's our shortcomings that I don't know. There's blind spots in my life I don't know. There's no rank or title for a good idea or for feedback. That it's just not. So as a leader, you have to just understand, wow, there's so much information around me. Even with the people that are being, quote unquote, led by me, I can still ask for their feedback. They can develop me as a leader. And I would highly encourage you to build that behavior of feedback with your team. You teach it, so in turn, you can ask for it.
How do you develop relationships with your team in a way that is genuine, like you genuinely care about them, but you also know as the leader that you're developing that relationship to a degree in order to get something out of them that they may not necessarily realize or even understand. And I don't mean that in a manipulative way, but I see some people that take that too far, where the relationship is to the point where they're super close friends or whatever it may be, and that can sometimes get in the way of their ability to lead. How do you go about developing a relationship in a way that is meaningful, helpful, but also not too far down that road? Or is there such thing as too far down that road?
There might be too far down that road. But I would err on going too far down the road than never going down that road at all. And the idea of being manipulative, of asking how your weekend went, I think we got to give people more credit than they do. They understand and they can sense genuality when it's there and when it's not there. So if I ask you, hey, talk about the game, over the weekend, the thing that we have to get people to understand is I may not even care about the basketball game. But this is what I want to get leaders to understand is you may not care about the basketball game, but who on your team will. That's that relationship that you have to build. That's that genuality. I'm making up a word, I think.
Yeah, I think
so too. What is it? Full of genuine?
Genuinely?
Genuinely?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what we're trying to get to is the idea that, hey, I really care about you as a person. I'm going to ask about you away from the office. We used to have this skill leader test when you first became a leader in the military. You had a sergeant's book, and in your sergeant's book, it had all your squad leaders' names, their wives' name if they were married, their kids' names, their birthdays, their anniversaries, all that, and you would be graded and checked on that by your leader. Hey, Private Henderson, do you know his birth date? Wow. That's the type of leader that I was trained in when I was first becoming a brand new leader, was the idea that it's a whole person. It's not just somebody that's in boots. No, when they take their boots off, they're still the person that you're still in charge of. And so it's 365 leadership. And so that's why I err on this, going down that road more than never going down that road at all, is because, again, servant leadership, we've got to understand that I'm trying to build a relationship with you, because when I add rules and I have no relationship, that's when you get rebellion.
It's hard to get people up to follow that if they don't understand the why. You mentioned the relationships being really important. I would agree with that. I think it's important for a leader to know their people so well that they know what's going to motivate. Because there may be somebody on your team when you say, hey, how was the game this past weekend or whatever, and maybe they're not even a sports fan at all, and you're asking about a game, and then that shows clearly this person doesn't know me at all. And so I don't think there is here's the 5 questions or 5 things you need to say to everybody on your team, because that doesn't necessarily meet your team where you're at.
Right. But that's your one-on-one conversations. That's when you really get to know your people, is that one-on-one, is ask them, hey, what do you think your purpose is? What motivates you? How can I help?
Yeah.
3 simple, very questions that really gets to the heart of that person. And you figure out, okay, well, wow, I am really failing this person because they think I'm supposed to do this, and we haven't talked about that.
What are some of the resources? What are your go-to resources for personal development, leadership development? What does that look like?
Yeah, for me, I read a ton of books. I love the idea of a holistic approach to leadership. So your John Maxwell's, you're definitely what we use for the hiring practice here, Patrick Leone. I eat all his books up. And then there's a couple of podcasts that I listen to regularly, Andy Stanley podcast and HR Heroes, those kind of things that kind of get you the business perspective and then also the holistic approach, and you kind of combine it together into this ethos that you're trying to present to people.
What's your favorite leadership book? If you only had one resource that you could point people to that says this book right here is a book that's really meant a lot over your lifetime, or even in a specific situation, what would that book be?
Well, I mean, I think you can glean a lot from a religious kind of perspective in the Bible, right? You can't, if you try to be a servant leadership, if you're not looking at the Bible for that beginning, then you're missing the mark. After that, believe it or not, it's an Army reg. It's Leadership 101 in the Army. If you go back to it, that regulation was written 50 years ago. And some of the stuff that's still in that book is relevant today. So those are the two things that I would highly recommend people to just tap into something. Again, you got to figure out who you are, right? Are you a transactional, transformational servant leader? And then figure out, put those people around you that will make you better.
I always find that the way that I've been, I guess, grown over time, there's always been somebody in my life that I've been able to go to that was a strong leader, that's somebody that everybody has these people that you just look to naturally, and it's somebody that, man, if when I grow up, I want to be like that person. And those people in my life over time have been invaluable for my own personal development. And it's not necessarily that I want to mimic who they are, what they are in every area of their life, but I've known some really, really good dads that I can look to and say, you know what, I want to be like you in that realm. And I've known some really good business leaders that I could say, I really want to be like you in that realm. But just because I want to be like you in that realm doesn't mean I want to be like you in any other realm, because you may really suck in a lot of other areas. And I think it's important to find people in your life that are maybe a couple steps ahead of you in different areas, and glean what you can glean from them and kind of throw away the rest. We don't have to look for that all-in perfect, this person is the end-all be-all that I want to be when I grow up, but just look for different areas, because having a mentor or someone that you can look up to and ask questions, that person you can give a call to and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, can you give me some feedback here, and bounce ideas off of, is super, super important.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. The two kind of people that come to mind when you ask, kind of your groundwork, or who did you look up to? One, it's pretty easy for me. It's my dad. He taught me a lot of just drive, and the idea that your name has meaning. He used to tell me all the time, hey, make sure when someone says your name, they do it in a good light. It's the idea that, hey, whenever, good light. I don't know. It's probably a Southern thing or something. I don't know.
You don't want people to think badly about you.
You don't want to, yeah.
Oh, that Greg Henderson guy. Oh my goodness, what is he doing? That's right. A jackwagon.
And he taught me your job is to get up and go to work and do your best at the job. And so that kind of led to the military. It was pretty easy. They kind of showed me that the things that I was raised in, I used to tell people I was just raised right. They honed those skills, and they added leadership onto the whole bucket of stuff, the stuff that I would kind of lean into. My first chaplain was my mentor. So when I first joined the Army, I was a chaplain assistant. And so you're a private, you're an E1. I was 18 years old. My first line leader, right, the guy that I reported to every day, was a captain, but a chaplain, very first day of the Army. And he was amazing. He was actually the one that married Amanda and I, after the fact. But he showed me about presence than it is about titles. Because technically he wasn't in a leadership position. Sure, he was my boss, but he only had one person to really take care of. He was more about ministry of presence. So his foot would be on every square foot of any space that we would be involved in. He would walk around and talk to every single soldier. And he showed me that you have got to just talk to people as people. You've got to just understand that there's stuff going on that you don't even know about unless you ask. And that's what is really cool about being in the business world now, is there's so much out there that we just get tied up into the 9 to 5, and we forget, or maybe we don't even ask the question. Yeah, Johnny didn't have that report, on time, but Johnny's dad was also getting results for cancer. The same day, and maybe the hour, he got a text from his dad about cancer results. We don't we don't think about that. And I think that's something that we should think about.
I agree. I think that's the joy of being in a small business, where you don't have those experiences as often as you do in a lot of a corporate setting where results are the only thing that matters and people don't.
Right.
And there's really good big corporations out there that don't operate that way. And so I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but
Sure.
the reality is in small businesses, it's hard to ignore and get away from the person that your employee is, because it's going to shine in every area. You mentioned the idea that your title isn't as important as your presence in a lot of ways. And this is one thing that we hit hard on in our HR on-ramp, the idea that, especially in the HR world specifically, that leaders are there and you're leading somewhere, even though your title may not be director or boss or manager or leader or anything resulting or indicative of a leadership position. If you're in the HR space, you're typically a leader. And one of the things that we always that we hit on is the idea that to be a good HR leader, you first have to be a good leader. Because the reality is most HR issues are coming out of a space that quality leadership would have either cut those off at the head, prevented them altogether, or addressed this in some way before it got to be a big issue. So as you're talking to second hat HR folks, maybe it's a business owner that also has to double as the chief HR officer, whatever it may be. How do you encourage them and spur them on to understand that their role as it relates specifically to HR is really a role that is about them developing their leadership skills and abilities?
Yeah, we have this conversation, unfortunately, too many times, especially in the business owner who is running, their small business, and they don't really have a lot of people under them in the leadership role, and so they're doing it all. Multiple clients come to mind when I think about that, and it's fun because I get to be at the beginning. Right, this is their first chance of really diving into leadership and to figure out, wow, there's some issues with people. I never thought about that when I thought about, hey, I want to run my own business. And it's interesting because I get to show them that it's okay to be human for one, and then sometimes it's okay to be the businessman for the other. And I describe it like this: there's some business decisions that can be made as Greg. Hey, I understand. Go ahead. We're good. And there's some other business decisions that need to be made as Mr. Henderson. And that's kind of how I, show them the dichotomy a little bit of being in that leadership role. Yes, you have to have a heart and you have to be human, but then also you have to show, well, no, I'm not for non-for-profit, right? I'm for-profit. I have to understand there is a standard and I have to make some money. And so this is a business decision, not personal.
We talked about this. Oh goodness, it was a few weeks back. Whenever we were doing an employee spotlight with Kim in our office, who's our director of accounting, and both Kim and I kind of grew up in the firm a little bit, and we talked about the difference between. I mean, everybody here we're friends with and hang out outside of work, and there's times at which we have to go and say, "Hey, Becky, I'm having this conversation with you." As in my case, the COO of this company. And this is XYZ. And there's sometimes I need to go and say, hey, Becky, I'm having this conversation with you just as your friend. Right. And vocally saying that and expressing that is helpful to set the table to understand both on both, in my example, Becky and my situation, that this is the context by which we're having this conversation. We could be jovial, we could joke around, we can goof off, we can call each other names or whatever, and it's all in good friendly tone. And then there's other times it's, hey, you know what? We're setting the table as this is a real conversation, and if you start talking back to me or getting aggressive, I'm going to show you the door, because this is conversation that we're having as boss to employee or leader to follower, whatever, vocabulary you guys use inside of your organization. And just verbally saying that really gives clarity to both sides to understand what this conversation is going to look like. But it doesn't make the conversation any more difficult, or any more easy, but it does provide clarity into what's about to happen. That way, because Kim and I talked about the sometimes we would go in and say, "All right, Becky, you were supposed to do X, Y, Z, and it didn't happen, and it's late or whatever." And Becky could fire back and say, "Well, I was just playing around with whatever." And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I think you misunderstood. I'm not talking to you as my friend. I'm talking to you as your boss, and this cannot happen. And that was difficult until we really caught on to the idea that there's just multiple relationships, multiple hats in our relationship with every person here. And so
it's the body, boss to buddy and then back.
Yeah. And that's a common deal. If you're a leader in a small business, this is a common issue that you face because you do have employees, but those same employees are also a lot of times close friends. If you're working at a company that only has 20 full-time employees, you guys are spending 40 hours a week together. You're going to know each other, I would hope so anyway,
right,
better than just your employee number,
sure,
or your work product. Now,
and that's what we hope.
We hope. Some people don't operate like that, and that's perfectly fine. But in our world, we expect to have a relationship there that goes beyond just, hey, you're the guy that sits in the cubicle next to me, or you're the person that's in the office down the hall or whatever it may be.
Sure.
Another thing that I want to hit on real quick is, and this is something that I would encourage all of our viewers out there to think about a little bit, is when I think about leadership, I think about preparedness. A lot of times we will rush to knowledge or rush to resources in order to get equipped for a moment. And then when we're equipped for that moment and that moment passes, we let our guard down and we take a breath and we're waiting for the next moment to come up. And then we're going to rush to resources to get equipped. That is a very unhealthy view of being a leader. If you're in a position where you are a leader and people are coming to you often or frequently in any way whatsoever for advice or feedback or help, then you have to be constantly equipping yourself to handle those situations. I think about it as like developing a library. If you were to start a library tomorrow, you wouldn't wait until the order came in to go buy the book. You would have some books in place that some people are going to want to check out or buy or whatever. You have that inventory in place ready to go. Being a leader in a lot of ways is similar. You have to have an inventory of your leadership skills ready to deploy at any moment because you don't know what situations are ever going to come up with you. And so if you want to develop your leadership skills, be be prepared about developing those skills way before they come up. I think about it, if a tornado is going to hit here today, then we better have been prepared for that yesterday or we're going to be up a creek. And as a leader, one of the best things you can do is stay ahead of the game from a preparedness and equipping standpoint. The ways in which I think is really helpful to do that is, you mentioned earlier, leaders have to be readers. If you're not, if you don't have a healthy library of books that you're, reading through or have read through and are constantly reading through, then you're going to fall behind. There's only a couple of ways in which you could develop yourself over time. One of which is the people you hang around with. Another is the information that goes into your brain. And reading good quality books is one of the ways that you can develop that. Also, find a mentor that has the authority to speak into your life, that can say, hey, you know what, you're wrong about X, Y, Z, that you trust implicitly, so that whenever they do come to you and say that you're wrong about X, Y, Z, the guard doesn't go up and say, no, you're wrong, and you get into a big fight. You have to have some people in there that take it or leave it. They're gonna be willing to come to you and say, hey, you know what, you handled this situation badly, and this is why, and grow from those things. And then lastly, and we'll start to wrap up a little bit, you have to be humble enough to be able to say, I don't have all the answers. If you find yourself in a situation where you are constantly the person that people are going to for advice, for opinions, it's easier to build yourself up as the expert that knows it all. And that can lead to pride getting in the way of self-development. And you have to fight against that in every area of your life so that you don't become stagnant and stop growing because you think you have it all figured out. So those are my tips for leadership.
And then ask your teammates on your next one-on-one, who's the leader of the Avengers?
That's right. And if they don't say Captain America, then you need to fire them because they don't know anything about anything in the world.
Or you could challenge them on why they think that, and that hopefully will get you to know where they think leaders should be.
And explain to them why they're wrong along the way. I'm pretty confident that I have the right answer here. So. Well, I appreciate you guys out there listening to us talk a little bit about leadership and our experiences anyway. I fully expect that everybody has some different opinions and different views of leadership, different styles. We didn't even talk about, a bunch of different styles of leadership. There's some really good books and resources out there to get into that if that's something that is interesting to you. We do have a question to answer from last week. So last week we talked about ways in which leaders can constantly or frequently waste time. And one of the questions that came through was, how do I know the difference between work that I'm doing that is necessary for me to do and work that I'm doing that is something I should not be doing, that I'm wasting my time as the leader doing that work. So Greg, what's your opinion there? How can I know the difference between meaningful work and work that I need to offload?
I think it goes back to having your KRAs set up, right? Your expectations. So when we go through the KRA exercise, we always talk about, hey, what are the tasks that I can delegate? What are the tasks that I should not be doing? And what are the tasks that lead to firm revenue or some type of exponential return? I think that's a pretty easy way to view those. Here's the thing that we always consider. The task that takes your time and your energy may not be the most important task. So just kind of look at that.
Yeah, I'll say there's two guiding principles that I use in this for this question. And you mentioned both of them. The first of which is this something that only I can do? If it's not something that only I can do, then I'm starting to look hard at, is this something I should be doing? Because if I'm not the only person that can be doing that task, then most likely, not always, but most likely, I need to be giving that to somebody else, assuming there's somebody there to give it to. And if there's not, well, then maybe we need to talk about getting somebody there that it could be given to, developing that next round of leaders. The other thing that I want to think about for that is, what is the multiplier effect of what I'm doing? You mentioned, how do you multiply the value or the benefit of that? Everything in my role here, everything that I should be doing, this isn't everything that I do, everything I should be doing, because everybody, including myself, struggles with this greatly. Everything that I should be doing should have a multiplying effect and impact on the firm as a whole. If I'm getting into the weeds of answering one-off support questions that everybody else on my team should know the answer to and can respond to, then I'm wasting my time doing that. And it's not wasting from the standpoint of I'm not being helpful or I'm not being valuable, but it's wasting my time from the standpoint of that's not my job. Not in an unhealthy way, but that doesn't fit my role. And when I do that, I'm stealing the opportunity for somebody else to be doing that and fulfilling their purpose in their role, also learning from what whatever that project or task could be. But also, I'm stealing from my company because I'm doing work that I shouldn't be doing, and that's stealing time away from the work that I should be doing. And so those are the two things that I think about just off the top of my head is, does it have a multiplying effect? And is it something that only I can do? So that's it. If you're out there listening, we really appreciate it. Thank you for spending some time talking with us or listening to us, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, anywhere else, Stitcher, Premium. I don't know where all the other podcasts are coming from.
He was going to keep going. I was like,
right.
I know all those.
I'm trying to think of all the places that I think of that I see podcasts. But we're on all the places, so I don't know where you're listening to us, but we're really glad that you are joining us today. And so until next week, y'all have a great time, and we'll talk to you again next week.